Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. We are 9 days away from Inter Miami's next game, and it is a big one, a special one, I think is maybe the right way to talk about it. Inter Miami faces Al Ahly in the opening match of the Club World Cup. I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. Today, we're going to be talking about what the Club World Cup means for Inter Miami from a being there perspective, and maybe a little bit about how fans should view this, or at least a couple permission structures for fans to view this in a way they can either enjoy it or hate it, or whatever you want to do. But we wanted to talk about how Inter Miami fans should be feeling about this tournament, or at least one way they could be feeling about it. And then we'll get into some transfer rumors at the end. I think we have an interesting conversation that I didn't put good graphics together for, but I think the conversation is what's going to bring everyone together. But before all of that, Saur, my friend, how are you feeling on this fine Thursday evening?
Inter Miami and the Drive Pink Dialogue go global in 9 days. That's an exciting prospect. I'm looking forward to it. We go out and show ourselves to the world. And it's slightly nerve-wracking, but I think more so than anything, it's a very exciting prospect for the club as a whole and for us fans as well. And I'm looking forward to that. As you mentioned, this conversation is going to be just a portion of what the fans could potentially feel like about the Club World Cup. We don't obviously want to tell you how you should feel, but I think it's just going to add to the conversation about the Club World Cup and where Inter Miami stands in that sense. So I'm excited for that. And might I add, your graphics, as always, have been on point, or rather, the graphic department's graphics has been right on point. So well done to them. Don't be too critical. I'm sure they're great.
Yeah, this one was on me, so you're more than welcome to be critical. The title of this episode is The Club World Cup Isn't About Winning for Inter Miami. Spoiler alert, our next episode is going to be titled The Club World Cup is All About Winning for Inter Miami. So if you're thinking, why would I watch this when I want us to actually compete and win, and we're going to give you a bunch of excuses why that doesn't matter, I will just let you know that we will give the other side of that argument in the next episode, and we will talk about Palmeiras and Porto and Al Ahly, and we will do a more competitive on-field breakdown about what we should expect from this tournament. But I think that there's another side to this that is worth delving into, and I have seen, at least from sort of my sense of the Inter Miami fandom, that there are two distinct viewpoints on the Club World Cup, and I think people are going to be let down either way if they stick rigidly to these two viewpoints. And so I want to give some permission structures for people to find a way to enjoy this tournament. And so let me start by saying I've sensed, and you may be somewhere in the middle, or maybe you've been listening to us and agreeing with us, and that it should be somewhere in the middle, but that a lot of people either think that the Club World Cup is not important. It is a cash grab. It is not something we should be taking seriously. We shouldn't participate. It's a glorified exhibition tournament, all of these other things. And it's sort of a waste of our time to be seriously thinking about it. And we're not going to do well in it anyway. So I don't want to get my hopes up. I don't want to think too much about it. I wish Inter Miami wasn't even, participating. Maybe you don't feel great about the way they got in, all of that kind of thing. And so you're a fan, you're going to watch, but it's not something you want to get invested in. And I understand that. And then there's this other sort of idea that this is a tournament and you have the best player in the world. Let's go win it. And I also think that's ambitious. And I don't want to criticize you for that, because if this is your team or if this is your favorite player or whatever, of course you want to see them do well. And I totally understand that. But Inter Miami is about to play in this tournament for a month. And if you're sort of crabby about being a part of it, you're going to have a bad time for the next month. And that's not fun. And if you are thinking Inter Miami has a chance to go to the semifinal or win the whole tournament or whatever, I think there's a chance, probably a good chance, you're going to be pretty disappointed with what ends up happening on the field. And so I want everyone to enjoy Inter Miami. I want everyone to find a way to enjoy this tournament, because I think it's a really cool event. And so I think we should start by talking about where Inter Miami fans should be. Saur, what do you think?
I think you've done a really good way in phrasing the two sides of the argument. And for me, I think the only way to actually enjoy this tournament is fall somewhere in the middle. And you should take this tournament seriously because your team is playing in this tournament. It is significant, it is prestigious, it is important. But at the same time, you have to be pragmatic, realistic, and understand what the status of your team is in comparison to the other teams that are in this tournament. That being said, I think falling in that middle aisle will potentially help you, potentially help us make the best of the next 3 weeks, or however long Inter Miami is in this tournament. And that, for a club that's only 5 years old, is an important place to be. So hopefully this conversation gives you something to think about and gives you a reason to be excited for what's coming up next, because there is a lot to be excited regardless of whether you think Inter Miami is going to go far in this tournament or whether you think Inter Miami is going to do poorly in this tournament. There's a lot to be excited about.
For the record, it's sixth year of Inter Miami, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, and then also I think we should preface this by saying you could feel however you feel, and I think the way you feel is comes from your instinctual gut on how you're feeling about the team and about the tournament in general. So we're not here to tell you that you're wrong, but we want to give you as I keep saying, a permission structure to enjoy this tournament. So my general take is that Inter Miami's not going to win the tournament, and I don't think that's an outrageous take. If they get out of the group stage, that would be a phenomenal success. For the record, who they would play in the second round would be one of either Botafogo, who's the best team in South America, Atletico Madrid, or Paris Saint-Germain, who's the best team in the world. So even if they get out of the group stage, I think hoping or expecting to get out of that next game is like it's just not going to happen if you're going up against a PSG.
Can you imagine that?
What a story that would
What
be.
a game that would be. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, anyway, so that I think is success for Inter Miami. If they can get out of the group stage, that would be a tremendous success. I think if they can look competitive, it would be a tremendous success. And if they get blown out 15-0 on, in terms of all three games by the goals allowed versus goals for, this can still be a success for Inter Miami. But as a fan, if you're hoping to get out of the group stage and maybe even expecting to get out of the group stage and you lose 15-0, it's going to feel terrible. And so I think there's a conversation to be had of expect nothing and enjoy everything you get from a competitive perspective in this tournament. How would you respond to that?
It's hard because football fans inherently they live in their own little bubble and their world. And I include myself first and foremost as that person who tries to create a different reality for myself. So checking your expectations is very difficult. Accepting the reality is very difficult. When I go into that first game against Al Ali, I am wanting my team to win. I understand some fans would be disappointed or very angry if Inter Miami doesn't perform well against Al Ali. But I think first and foremost, there needs to be a recognition that that moment, playing against one of the best teams in Egypt, one of the best teams in Africa, does not come every single day. This is a very important point in Inter Miami's young history. And you have to take it with a pinch of salt, regardless whether we win or whether we lose. And that's how you have to go. That's the kind of mindset you have to go in with every single game, right?
So how do you enjoy it if you want them to win and they might not win? And by the way, whether it's Porto or Al Ahly or Palmeiras or it's PSG, or it's Bayern Munich in the final, whatever, this could happen at any point. And so having the expectations be managed, I think, is important. But that doesn't mean you should just shut yourself off to enjoying the experience. And I think this is where I want us to at least have the permission to go to is this is a huge event. And I understand that for a lot of people, they haven't gotten quite into the mood yet. But starting in 10 days or 9 days, this is going to be the talk of the footballing world for the rest of the tournament. And that's not because of Inter Miami necessarily. It's because of PSG and it's because of Al Hilal and it's because of Palmeiras and Botafogo and Manchester City and Chelsea and all these other huge clubs. This is going to be the thing that everyone in the world that cares about soccer is going to be paying attention to. And Inter Miami gets to be a part of that. And I think that's cool in and of itself, and that we should appreciate it for, and I'm going to try and appreciate it for what it is, because this is cool. It is cool. And I just want to, like, I want people to be okay with it being cool and us being a part of it, and that be good enough.
And I think you mentioned it very clearly to me offline that honestly, if our team wasn't a part of it, we wouldn't necessarily be paying too much attention to this tournament as such. But there's a genuine factor here that Inter Miami is part of this tournament, and not every team gets to enjoy that. Not every fan gets to enjoy that. If you're a fan of clubs like Arsenal, if you're a fan of clubs like Crystal Palace, if you're a fan of clubs like LA Galaxy, they won or Columbus Crew fans, for instance, they would be very upset about the fact that
Yeah.
their teams are not representing um, their leagues in this tournament. So us as Inter Miami fans need to recognize that privilege and need to enjoy that privilege. You're going up on a global stage against international teams that you would normally only play in preseason. And for anyone who tells you from another fandom that this is just another glorified preseason, it's not. This is a competitive tournament that teams are actually taking seriously. It's a revamped structure. Teams are spending money to make sure that they have the right representation and squad presence to be able to be competitive in this tournament. And this is only a once in a lifetime opportunity for a nascent club like Inter Miami to be able to put out a player like Lionel Messi, the one of the best players in the world to play the sport of football, as part of our team and go out and compete with some of these international heavy hitters. So you're going up on a global stage, and us as fans, we're going to be able to see our team play against a completely new team, uh, interact with a fandom that we've never interacted with, and it's going to give us the opportunity to enjoy this entire tournament in a completely different light than if then we would have watched it if our team was not part of it. So I think there's just a general sense of, and I don't want to say it in that way, but I don't know how else to put it. So you might be able to say it in a better manner. But there's a general joy and prestige in participation itself. And not everyone may agree with this, but I think that's an important part of this for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's something cool. Here's one of the ways I'm trying to look at this. A couple years ago, 2 years ago, you and I were together in Washington D.C. the night of the um, UEFA Champions League. This is the year Manchester City played Inter Milan, and neither of us wanted Manchester City to win. And all day we were like preparing for that game. Neither of us are Inter Milan fans. Neither of us are Manchester City fans. Our day wasn't going to be ruined if Manchester City lost. I'm sorry, won. But we had like a rooting interest, and we spent the entire day getting ready and excited for it without sort of the emotional buy-in that if our team loses, it's going to wreck us in a way that um, is going to feel really terrible. It was an event, and we wanted to watch the event, and we had a rooting interest, but not in the type of way that our hearts got broken when the team we wanted to win didn't win. And maybe that's partially because we, partially probably thought that with Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne and all this, Inter Milan probably wasn't going to win. But it was an event, and the event is the part that matters more so than the game. And I think that's sort of how I want to think about this.
And also just getting together with your friends, sitting down, talking about what you would do if you were the coach, talking about how your team would play, talking tactics. I think it's just such a fun thing to do in the summer as well. And I think there's a genuine joy in just being there and participating against some of these big teams. And as a fan, just not taking it too seriously to the point that you're affected by how the scoreline goes or how your team loses or wins, but also at the same time still being able to enjoy it for what it is. And that's hard to say it in terms of how your emotions should be, but I think there's a genuine joy in just the participation of it.
The part of the brain that deals with speech is not the same that deals with emotion. So sometimes it is difficult
Exactly.
to verbalize your emotions in sort of an analytical way that makes sense and comes off in an intelligent way. So maybe we're not doing that right now. And if that's the case, I apologize. But we are trying our best because we want fans to enjoy this for what it is and not ride too high based on the actual performance, and also not blow it off like it's nothing in a way to sort of protect yourself or whatever. I think it is cool that we get to be a part of this. I think it is cool that there's an event that the entire world is going to be watching, and our team gets
It's
to
part of
be
it.
the star of it, right? Or, it's like a concert. You get to be the star of the concert. Um, and we're going to be doing a pregame show right before to get everyone excited for it. Like we get to do that. And I don't, that's not a plug. That's like, we get to give a 1 hour pregame show for the event that everyone in the entire world is going to be watching. I think
And
that's
Inter
pretty cool.
Miami is kicking off the Club World Cup. We're the
Right.
first game of the Club World Cup, and that's I still remember. And now that you mention verbalizing your emotions, I still remember the 2010 FIFA World Cup in South Africa, and the first game was South Africa versus Cameroon, and I didn't have any equity in it. I didn't care who'd win or who would lose, but I sat there on my couch and I still remember that goal that was scored to kick things off. And I still remember how I felt at that time. So just because your team may or may not be in it, I think this is just such a cool tournament to be in, such a cool festivity to be part of. And I think it's going to be super fun. And the more I think about it, the more excited I get. And whether Inter Miami wins or loses or goes far or not, I think is just so cool that we get to be a very important part of it and get to start the proceedings as well, set the tone for the tournament.
Yeah. Okay. Pivoting a little bit to sort of how Inter Miami fans can feel about it if they're looking for a new way. Don't let any MLS fans try and bring you down about this. Orlando City doesn't get to be a part of this, which means they've already lost. Whatever happens to Inter Miami in the tournament, they're the real losers when it comes to this tournament, because all they get to do is hate watch Inter Miami, and that's nothing to be happy about. This is a big tournament from a prestige perspective, and when you look at who Inter Miami is playing in our group, and we by no means have the hardest group, you're talking about Al Ahly, which is the biggest club in the history of African soccer. It's the biggest club. They have won more African Champions Leagues. They just dominate Egypt, which is considered probably the best league in Africa. They're just a dominant force. And you look at Palmeiras, not quite the same level of domination in South America, but it is potentially the biggest club in South America, the most renowned club in South America. I know if you're a Boca Juniors fan or a River Plate or Fluminense or whatever, you might disagree with that, but you wouldn't argue that they are right there at the top. And of course, Porto, one of the historic clubs in Portugal, and a team that's won the Champions League in the last 25 years, right? They've been the best team in the world in the last 25 years, at least if you consider the UEFA Champions League winner the best team in the world. That is pretty good company for Inter Miami. That is an MLS team. And that's the point, is you get to be associated with those teams. Inter Miami wants to be that in the MLS. They want to be that in North America. And it's true, they've only been around for 6 years, and they don't have the CONCACAF Champions Cups to back it up, and they don't have the MLS Cups to back it up, and the 40 leagues and 12 Champions Leagues like Al Ahly. But that is their ambition. That is what they want to be. That's why they brought in Lionel Messi, so they can be the biggest club in North America. And spoiler alert, the biggest clubs in North America are going to be at this tournament, not just this year, but moving forward. And Inter Miami has put themselves at the table in this tournament to sort of show the world we're one of the biggest clubs in North America. And I think they have that opportunity, regardless of what happens on the field. Because if Inter Miami beats Al Ahly and Al Ahly goes 15, gives up 15 goals and scores 0, no one's going to think Al Ahly isn't one of the biggest clubs in Africa. It's just that they went into a buzzsaw of a tournament and they couldn't quite hang, and that's okay. And so even though Inter Miami may or may not do well, they will still go on the global stage and say, we're one of the biggest clubs in North America. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think you need to contextualize this as well, right? When Dynamo Kiev goes up against Real Madrid, nobody is expecting Dynamo Kiev to win that game. But it's still a matter of pride and legacy for their fans to just be able to step on the pitch with players from Real Madrid. Imagine you being an Inter Miami player and you getting to play in front of millions and millions of viewers with the likes of Palmeiras, with the likes of Porto, with the likes of Al Ahly.
Well,
You
hold on, hold
have
on,
to
hold on,
start
hold on, hold on,
somewhere.
hold on, hold on. Stop, 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 stop. It's not that they get to go play with these guys. It's that they're playing in a tournament where they belong.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not. It's not
It's
like
not a
Dinamo
charity
Kiev
case.
versus
Yeah.
Real Madrid, which is, I think that's where you were going with this, and I don't want it to be that. Like I want it to be, okay, yeah, Porto may be a great team, but they're going up against one of the best teams in North America, and that's something to be taken seriously. Um, and I think that's the cool aspect of it. It's not that Inter Miami should be happy just to be there, which I mean I think they should, but we want to portray that we belong here, even if we're not ready to win the whole thing.
And you have to start somewhere, right? We could very well beat Al Ahly. It's not likely, but anything can happen in football. Weirder things have happened in football. And yeah, you absolutely said it. We deserve to be there. We belong there. And it's an exciting prospect. It's a very, very exciting prospect.
What does it mean for Inter Miami as a club?
I mean, there's so many things, right? It's experience, it's brand exposure, it's about legacy, it's about prestige, as you've mentioned already. There's just so much that Inter Miami can build on from this as a platform, because we go out there, showcase ourselves to non-MLS fans. If you think about it as fans, you might end up finding somebody who's an Inter Miami fan 10 years down the line, and they tell you, oh, you know why I started supporting Inter Miami? It was because I watched them play in the Club World Cup. And that in itself is such a beautiful thing. It's about exposing your club and representing your club on the biggest global stages. And that in itself is absolutely massive.
Yeah, and we get to be a part of that, and I think that's where I want to keep coming back to is like we're going to be doing a pregame show, and we're going to be doing an instant reaction to the biggest game in the world that day, and I don't know, I'm just very grateful to be part of it. Maybe I'm the one weirdo that thinks this is um, that thinks this is really cool. Al Ahly. This is the opening game. It's going to be at Hard Rock Stadium, so this is going to be the biggest crowd Inter Miami's ever played in front of. We've never done that before. Do you think it matters that this is in South Florida?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Of course it matters. It's going to be a lot more, there's going to be so many pink jerseys in there. There's going to be so many Messi fans in there. It's going to be a raucous crowd that's going to be Inter Miami's favor. It's going to be a 12th man, and that's going to be fun. I'd rather have more Inter Miami fans, and I'd rather have more Messi fans in the stadium than Al Ahly fans or Egyptian fans or non-Inter Miami fans. It's definitely going to matter. And I also think South Florida is capable of creating that perfect atmosphere that I think is going to be so, so fun to have.
Okay, this is where I want to take this conversation. If you're in Europe right now, you're seeing teams build up for this tournament, right? If you're from Al Hilal, you're trying to buy players for this tournament. Like it's happening, it's real, it's right now. And if you're Manchester City, you're trying to buy players for this tournament. And if you're PSG, you're probably still celebrating your victory. But Real Madrid is buying players because they want them for this tournament. It's already time. Like we're gearing up for the Club World Cup. It hasn't felt that way yet in the MLS. It hasn't felt that way yet for Inter Miami. Do you think that's a matter of time, or do you think is it that we're just not excited about it yet?
No, I think it's right now because of the international break going on, because of Messi playing for Argentina and Spain and France playing in the Nations League, all of that. I think the attention has been diverted away. But as soon as all these players come back, as soon as we start seeing the training footage, as soon as we start seeing rumors about who's going to be starting in that first game, potential rumors, I'm still crossing my fingers of Inter Miami signing somebody before the Club World Cup starts. That I think is going to start putting us in a really good mood for this tournament. And it's going to take a couple of days, but I think a week before is when we're going to start actually sensing, okay, things are happening now. Right now, I think the world is too preoccupied with the international break. The season's just ended. The Champions League just finished last weekend. So there's a lot of that. But next week, I think, is when we're going to start feeling good about it.
I'm a little conflicted, and I don't know if this is an American thing because I actually think you might be wrong. I think a lot of the
Hmm.
world is there. I don't know if it's a US thing because we have so many things going on that we can't like get there yet. Maybe it's a US thing because we don't think our teams are going to do well. Or maybe it's just a Miami thing because Miami fans, not just Inter Miami fans, but all sports fans in Miami have a very bandwagony type of approach to sports, and I get that. Um, lived that my whole life, so I understand. And so maybe until it's real, and not just real, but maybe there's some success, it's not going to click for Inter Miami or for U.S. fans. But I do wonder why it hasn't felt more hyped up. I mean, we were doing our podcast Sunday, and it was kind of weird that it was real. Like we had kind
It's
of
next
mentioned it a
week.
couple
Yeah.
times. Yeah, exactly. But
It's in 2 weeks.
it's here now. They're posting pictures on social media about them getting ready for Al Ali and stuff like that. So um, I am wondering when that's going to like click in because, and
You know
if it's going to
when?
click in,
I think it's going to
because
click in when Inter Miami wins 2-1 against Al Ahly on opening day. And
can you
everyone's going to be
imagine?
like, "Oh." Can you actually okay, it's obviously difficult to predict what your reaction would be, but what would your reaction be if Inter Miami actually wins that first game against Al Ahly?
No, it's a belonging thing, right? I think if we can win against Al Ali, we can beat anyone. Like I think that's the truth. I think Al Ali, it's like a baseball player going from AAA to the majors. You don't know if you can actually do it, or a player that gets drafted into the NFL. Like it's a step up, and you actually might just not be physically capable of doing it, or you might be able to be a superstar. And I think that's one of the coolest aspects of this tournament is that we have no idea how an African club competes with a North American club versus a South American club and a European club. There's so few actual interactions on the field that I think it's going to be awesome to watch, not just from an Inter Miami perspective, but across the tournament. How does Al Ali, which is the biggest, best club in Africa, compete with Porto? That's something I'm really interested in because
Exactly.
I actually don't think Porto is going to outclass the rest of these teams in a way that is embarrassing, but they might. They could. Um, and so I think if Inter Miami can beat Al Ali, it's like, okay, if we can beat Al Ali, we can go head to head with Palmeiras. And like, see. Um, and that doesn't mean we're going to beat Palmeiras, but it does mean that we can beat Palmeiras. If we can beat Al Ali, we can beat Palmeiras. And I think if we can beat Palmeiras, we can beat Porto. So
Oh man, we're so delusional, man. We're so gullible and so delusional. After 27 minutes of this conversation, we've convinced ourselves that Inter Miami could beat Al Ahly. We convinced ourselves if we beat Al Ahly, we'll beat Palmeiras, and if we beat Palmeiras, we'll beat Porto. Not that I'm saying we can't, but I will tell you this: I will be speaking very loudly on social media if Inter Miami beats even one of those teams in the group, because there's a lot of accusation going around there from Inter Miami fans, from fans outside of Inter Miami, saying that we don't belong. And I want to completely disagree with you. And anything I say, you'll just dismiss as emotions. But I want to have actual hardcore data to back that. So when and if Inter Miami actually beats one of those teams, for the rest of the next 5 years until we play in the Club World Cup again, I will continue to hold that as Inter Miami's big achievement of why we actually belong in this tournament.
well, no, but here's the thing. Like Inter Miami might be the bulldog in this scenario. Like there's a chance that Inter Miami is way better than Al Ali. We are pessimistic right now because we don't feel great about where Inter Miami is at. We don't feel great about the coaching staff. Inter Miami didn't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, stuff like that. But there's a chance that they get on the field with Lionel Messi and say, I have never seen anything like this. And he puts four past him. Like that could happen. Is it optimistic to think it will happen? Of course it is. But it's not like out of the realm of possibility. Anything that Al Ali could do in your worst nightmare that they could do to us, Inter Miami could throw back right back at them. Palmeiras, Botafogo won the Copa Libertadores last year and the Brasileiro as the best team in Brazil and South America. And Gregory was a starter for them. Like that's an Inter Miami level player. He was when he was at Inter Miami, he was a good player, probably the best player at the time, but not like the best player in the league by miles, right? So it's okay. Maybe we are getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but
I think there are two things here. The chat is going to absolutely cook us. And let's remind ourselves our job was to convince the fans as to why it doesn't matter if Inter Miami wins or not in this tournament, for this episode at least. Um, and I think we're doing a really poor job of that because we've come back eventually to the point that Inter Miami is going to win against every single team that goes up against us. But this is the point, right? This is the exact point. You are allowed to be excited as fans about this tournament, regardless of what happens. You're allowed to speculate that, oh, we might actually just have that tiny sliver of optimism and hope against a team. When, for all you know, there's no chance for Inter Miami. But that doesn't matter right now. You
we don't
are
know
in a
that.
tournament that you could potentially get out the group stage for, but regardless of whether Inter Miami wins or not, it's a tournament that we get to be a part of, that we get to compete in. And imagine a scenario if Inter Miami actually goes up and becomes competitive against Al Ahly or is competitive against Palmeiras. I can totally see a scenario where Aviles locks down the striker of Al Ahly. We're going to be talking about, do you remember that great performance that Toto Aviles put up in that Club World Cup? Do you remember when Ian Frey nutmegged that Palmeiras player and almost scored? Those are the kind of moments that I'm looking for from this tournament. Our players get to play against some of the best players in the world. Can you imagine individually how important and prestigious this is going to be? I hope Yannick Bright is fit in time, because I want to be able to compare Yannick Bright with some of the best number sixes in Africa, some of the best number sixes in the world. Imagine him going up. It's going to be so fun.
The best player on Al Ahly, I've started doing research on Al Ahly. I haven't really looked into Palmeiras or Porto yet, but the best players is this sort of midfielder winger named Imam Ashur, who's supposed to be like a phenomenal player. He might be the best player in Africa. He went to Midtjylland in the Midtjylland. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it, in Denmark.
Midtjylland.
And he didn't play. Like, he didn't play for them. So again, I don't think fans should dismiss the idea that Inter Miami could go beat Al Ahly 5-0.
Okay, imagine this scenario.
They could also
right?
lose 5-0.
Yeah, we could 100% lose 5-0.
But we can win 5-0
could...
too. I want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and okay, let's
That's it. We're winning 7-2.
Scenarios.
I've gone all the way.
No,
you know
let's
what, guys?
consider scenarios.
Just go crazy. Just enjoy it. Just let your fan go crazy. Rationality is for losers. Let's go, baby.
I love how offline for you guys to get a little bit of insight into how this dynamic between myself and Scotty works. About 2 hours ago, before we went live on this podcast, he was not berating me, but laughing at me because I am apparently too irrational as a football fan. And he was talking to me about how my rationality can sometimes go out of the window. And this is where you're at now. So who's the idiot now, huh? You're part of the crowd. No, but in all seriousness, I think for me, the biggest scenario here is, okay, Inter Miami may lose 3-1 against Al Ahly, may lose 4-1 against Al Ahly. But if one of our players puts up a fantastic performance, if one of our players like Noah Allen, Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, any one of those, Yannick Bright, if they put on a good performance, if they put up a competitive performance, we now have bragging rights to say, listen, our number 6, our number 3, our left back went up against one of the best teams in Africa, and he absolutely locked down or pocketed their attacking winger. Right? We will be having these conversations. We will be judging our players in a very different light depending on how they perform. And if it's the alternative, if we don't play well, if they don't perform up to the mark, that's also a conversation to be had. There's just so much as fans that we get to be excited about, that we get to look forward to, whether positive or negative. And not everyone can do that. All the other teams are still playing in the MLS. We're playing on the global stage in front of millions of people. So enjoy that.
You're so wrong. Give us PSG. We're ready. We want
Oh yeah,
PSG. We
yeah,
want PSG. It wouldn't be fun if we didn't beat them. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I think we're going to win the groups. I think we're going to make it out of the group stage. We're going to play PSG and we're going to beat them. Don't hold me to that. I'm talking crazy right now. Last thing I did want to talk about as we get back into some sensibility. Tried to start this conversation a couple, 20 minutes ago, but this is, I think, going to be a demarcator of prestige of clubs not in Europe. And what I mean by that is we talk about Al Ahly and we say they've won 12 Champions Leagues, they've won 40 Egyptian Premier Leagues. And I think they're going to start counting, and they've been to 3 Club World Cups. I think Palmeiras and Botafogo are going to say, we go to Club World Cup every 4 years because we're that good. We consistently go. And I think if Inter Miami can repeat this, and what I mean by that is get to the next Club World Cup in 4 years, they will start to be able to say, we are the one team in North America that does this all the time. We expect to go to the Club World Cup. We expect to win Champions Leagues and qualify. And I think for Inter Miami to create a standard and expectation of this club that will live beyond Lionel Messi. I know he'll be, part owner or whatever, and so he will want this too. But beyond his playing days, I think going to this matters. And I think finding a way to keep going to these is going to matter. And it's going to give you a prestige that no other club in the MLS can compete with. And ultimately, or North America even really, because ultimately that's who Inter Miami does want to compete with. We want to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We want to win the MLS Cup. And we want to win the Open Cup and win Leagues Cup. And in order to do that, we need to have a prestige so we can recruit the best players that we will build and we will continue building by participation in this tournament now, hopefully again in 4 years. This could be a once-in-a-lifetime event. And so I don't want to put too much pressure on doing anything competitively. I don't want to put too much pressure on going back in 4 years or anything like that. But I do think that's what Inter Miami's goals are, is to be a participant at this tournament every 4 years, because they do win a CONCACAF Champions Cup every, once in a while, every couple of years, maybe 2 a decade or something like that. That's their ambition. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. And this is sort of part of the prestige building process. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, if Inter Miami gets to this tournament again, if Inter Miami is able to secure that spot regularly at a regular interval, then that means Inter Miami is a successful club that's winning trophies, and that's all that we can ask for. This is eventually going to become a symbol of whether you're a competitive team or whether you're a successful team, and this is where it starts.
And to those lines, and like along those lines, people aren't going to remember how you did necessarily. They're going to see that you were there.
Exactly.
No one expects Qatar or Saudi Arabia to go far in the World Cup. No one expects the U.S. to go far in the World Cup. Right? We hope to get past the first, to the quarterfinals or something. No one expects the U.S. to win it. And so it's just being there as part of the building process. Just being there as part of the prestige process. And Al Ahly is going to go back after this tournament and still be the biggest club in Africa. And there's no reason Inter Miami shouldn't try and position themselves in the same way, regardless of what actually happens on the field. No one's going to look worse at them based on the results, and no one should look worse at Inter Miami because of the results. It is a prestige building thing. And along those lines, because that's what we call a segue, part of the reason you want to build that prestige is because you want to recruit great players to come to your club. Inter Miami did get this 10-day window. Do you think they're going to take advantage of it at this point in time?
No, at this point in time, it doesn't seem like that. It's going to be hard to complete a move in 10 days. Inter Miami is notorious for wasting time on visas, on wasting time on administrative stuff.
Well, let's not say wasting time.
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
mean,
they have
it's
much
not in
control
our
over
hand,
it.
but yeah, it's not in our hand, but just we're jinxed with it. But I hope we get somebody in soon, because it'll be really fun to talk about that.
There have been a couple names connected to Inter Miami, and we don't know any of them in terms of how serious they are or how likely they are to happen. Only that we can look at the calendar and say 5 days is pretty tight. I think we would probably hear something by now. Uh, it is very unfortunate that the international window's on right now, because I think that actually really hurt Inter Miami. And the biggest name that we've heard for a while is Brian Rodriguez, who did speak publicly. He's on international duty with Uruguay. He did speak publicly about Inter Miami. He said he has an offer from Inter Miami. He might have some options in Spain, and so he sort of has to make the decision. Does he want the opportunity to play with Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi, or does he want to go fulfill his European dreams, or whatever he has? So tough situation for him, but even worse for Inter Miami, because that sounds like it's not something that he's pushing to make happen today. And I think if he's not pushing to make it happen today, it's not
happening imminently. Yeah, very tough. But I hope we have some backups, because we should have been prepared for this. We knew this tournament was coming up. We knew this window was going to come up. And I hope we had backups to our backups to our backups. I'm not sure about it, but we'll see. Not the end of the world. I'm sure we'll be able to recruit more players. But for this time period, at least, it doesn't seem like it's imminent by any means.
Yeah, a couple other names that I will just mention. Huracan's Matko Miljevic. Interesting for one reason, not interesting for a couple others. For those that don't know, he's Argentinian, but he has American citizenship, or is a dual citizen. He might be American born. And so he did actually make a debut with the U.S. men's national team under Pochettino in the January camp. He might have played one camp before that, but he wouldn't need to go through the visa process because he is an American citizen. So I guess in theory that one would be more plausible, but I also think that's a name that is connected with clubs like River Plate and maybe Boca Juniors in South America. And so it might be a little bit more difficult to, again, convince him now that this is his option to come. I will also add, I'm not a huge fan of the player, and I don't think he fits into this team.
Yeah, I think it's slightly annoying, because I almost had my heart set on Brian Rodriguez coming in. He looked like a really good player, and honestly, of course, Club America's best player. If we have to move away from him, getting anybody else is going to be almost like, okay, is this a backup? Is this, what are the prospects here? My question to you is, would you rather that Inter Miami brings in their first choice option right now if they're able to, but if not, then bring in somebody as reinforcements? Or do you rather just go into the Club World Cup, wait for that window, and not compromise on making signings, or a player that may not fit the profile, or is not entirely our first choice, but somebody that we can maybe make do with?
See, here's the thing. I think at this point in time, it's probably better to wait. But this was also an opportunity to recruit people because of
Yeah.
all the things we talked about, the prestige of this, saying, listen, you come to Inter Miami for the rest of the season, you're going to get to play in this tournament on the global stage. And if you want to go pursue your move in Spain in January or next summer, you know what's going to help? Having played against Porto or Palmeiras this
Having
tournament.
scored against Porto or
Yeah, exactly.
Palmeiras.
And your hat trick against Al Ali really went a long way.
Mhm.
uh, that I think was a recruiting tool, and I applied this a lot to the coaching search. A reason to move on from Pochettino. I'm losing my brain here, man.
Javier Mascherano.
Javier Mascherano. At the time that I said after the Orlando City game was because you could have sort of enticed a new coach with this tournament. That's now gone, both from a coaching perspective, but if you're talking about bringing in a player, you're going to lose it from a player's perspective. And so if you wanted to recruit a guy like Angel Di Maria, you could have said, hey, listen, you get to play on the global stage and come for the rest of the season. Then you can go sign with his boyhood club in January, and that's fine. So I think that's now out the window. And so if you're not getting a higher quality player because of that, I don't know if it matters much. What I will say is there's still a bunch of MLS play before the next window. So it's an opportunity. If you get a guy and you like, and you can get him in now, do it. But I do think the targets are going to change between now and July.
Yeah, I would just hate for the club to rush in a signing just for the sake of rushing in a signing and compromising on the kind of player that we need to bring in just so that we have reinforcements of the Club World Cup. I think it's more important to make sure the grand strategy of the transfer window doesn't change, and MLS season and our actual goals during the MLS don't get affected by it. So if you're able to bring somebody in that feeds into the MLS process, that feeds into our future goals in the Leagues Cup, in the MLS playoffs, then absolutely well and good. But I think we just shouldn't bring somebody in for the sake of bringing somebody in. And hopefully the front office is thinking that way.
Okay, so I have two names coming in from the chat that weren't on the rundown, but I'm just going to bring him in. The first is Neymar. Apparently, is not going to sign an extension with Santos, so he's going to be a free agent this summer. I don't know if that changed everyone's plans, but we're going to have to spend a couple more weeks talking about Neymar. The other one is Sean says we should at least ask about Alejandro Garnacho because we do have a DP spot open. Here's what I will say. I actually am a huge fan of MLS teams trying to get young players that are star potential that fall out with their club for whatever reason. And the poster boy for that is Ricky Puig, who was, when he was 17, was going to be a superstar for Barcelona. And by the time he was 21, some injuries, some financial problems for Barcelona. Like, things happened that pushed him out of the limelight. And I'm a huge fan of MLS clubs trying to go get those kids at the 2021 who maybe didn't quite work out. You can bring them in, and then maybe 3 or 4 years later, they can try and go get that move again. Ricky Puig being the greatest example. But the problem with that, and by the way, Gio Reyna, another player that sort of people would be mentioning along these lines, those players need to be the star of your team. They need to come in and run the team. If you're Gio Reyna, you need to come be the best player on your team so that you can try and be the best player in the league so you can try and get back to Europe. Same thing with Ricky Puig, and it would be the same thing with Alejandro Garnacho, who, by the way, I think might be the second best player in the league if he came. But even not A, he's not coming to the MLS because he's better than that. But B, even if you were an MLS team trying to recruit him, he would have to be your star player. And that's not what Inter Miami is in a position to do. And that
At
doesn't
least
just
not
apply
right now. Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't just apply to Garnacho. It would apply to a Ricky Puig. It would apply to anyone. They need to come be the superstar so that they can develop into a superstar and hopefully go be a superstar on a bigger stage. That's not what Inter Miami can offer these kids right now. They can offer them development, but you have to fit into their system. You have to fit into Messi's system.
And that's why we're getting players like Segovia and Allende, perhaps. Well, he's not young, but still, and then Redondo. But
Diego Gomez and
Diego
like, you
Gomez,
can get good
exactly.
players, but
and Inter Miami might reach one of those points after the Messi era where we may be able to recruit one of these youngsters who's going to be the superstar of the team. But I think we're just not there yet. And Garnacho, I think, wouldn't be particularly pleased to be the fourth most important player on this team, or the fifth most important player on this team.
Okay, let's talk about Alexis Cuello, because this is another name that has been linked with Inter Miami over the last 48 hours. Apparently, there's a $6 million price tag attached to him. He plays at the same club that Inter Miami got Gonzalo Lujan from, and that in of itself makes me very worried about him. But apparently, he's much better. He is a winger. This is a guy that we at least were mentioned with back in the offseason. In fact, this is a guy I think we've been mentioned not in talks with, but a guy we were interested in going back to the Tata Martino days a year and a half ago. So Inter Miami should know about this player well. $6 million is a huge fee. I don't know if that's actually, like, maybe that's just sort of how they start and it becomes $2 million and you keep 50% of the player's salary or player's rights or whatever. But this is another forward that Inter Miami's been attached to from Argentina. He's 25. So he's not particularly young, but should mention it while we're here. And I think that's the segue into something I've wanted to talk about for a while, and I've never organized it in a way that makes sense on screen. But here I have on screen every transfer since Lionel Messi decided he was going to come to Inter Miami. And I've separated them into two categories. Those from the Argentine Primera Division, the LPF, the Liga Profesional de Football, I guess. And those that came from anywhere else. And I think if you look at this list or this graphic, you will notice one thing. A lot of the players that Inter Miami has bought from Argentina, directly from Argentina, have been not busts, but disappointing compared to expectations and price tag. And almost every player they got from anywhere but was a success, with a couple exceptions of players that just came and maybe the jury's still out on. Um, I don't like recruiting players out of Argentina because I don't think the league translates well to the MLS, and I think Inter Miami needs players that are good enough to sort of push the envelope and not good enough to survive in the MLS. And I think that's a lot of the talent that comes out of Argentina. And so it makes me nervous that we're looking at Matko Miljevic, who is a 10 that's not particularly athletic, that has done well for Huracan, but it's a much harder league, and I don't think he can play in the midfield in the MLS. And we're looking at Alexis Cuello, who's a winger, who I'm worried about translating to the MLS. And I get that this is the specialty of Javier Mascherano, but it makes me very nervous because Inter Miami hasn't had a ton of success. And I want to be clear, it's not Argentines, because we've had plenty of successful Argentines, but they seem to not come from the
Argentinian league. Yeah.
Correct. So I wanted to put this out there because this is my new theory. It's not Argentinians, it's the Argentine league just doesn't translate well to the MLS. And for a team that wants to not just compete in the MLS, but win in the MLS, I don't think that's the recruiting ground we should be going for consistently.
So here's a question to your question and point. Why do you think Inter Miami looks at the LPF, the Argentinian league, so prominently when I think the base case is absolutely right? It doesn't seem to translate that well in how a player from the Argentinian league could perform in the MLS. So first question to be asked is, why does Inter Miami look in that league so often? Whether it's a Javier Mascherano thing, I think it's the fact that Javier Mascherano has connections, has networks in that league. He knows certain players, he's interested in certain players, and when he puts forward his recommendations to the scouting department, a lot of those come from the Argentinian league, where he has the network and connection to be able to pinpoint players that he thinks would be good for him and his play style. That for me is, I think, the number one reason. But I also think the club and the front office need to look into this a little bit more, because it's not about the league, the nationality, the language that a player speaks. It's about the profile and the fit. Unfortunately, the recruitment that we've done from the Argentinian league so far, people forget how physical of a league the MLS actually is, and athletic. And yes, technical aspect is very important. Of course, Busquets is probably the god of technicality when it comes to being in that midfield. He doesn't need to be a physically athletic beast, but Busquets is also a once in a lifetime player. So when we
he's also not he's not from
exactly, yes. But so when you're recruiting from the Argentine league, I think you really need to have a very precise point of what kind of player you want to recruit. They need to be physically athletic. They need to be able to deal with good pressure and play when basically the opposition is on top of you. Whereas in the Argentinian league, it feels like they take a lot more time on the ball. They rely a lot more on the technicality aspect of it. And it just doesn't translate that well into the MLS. So I think the front office needs to start thinking about those base cases and understand the sample size of what's the kind of player that you want to recruit for the MLS. And just because they play in the Argentinian league and they look really good in the Argentinian league and they put up really good numbers in the Argentinian league, doesn't necessarily mean they'll have the same numbers, they've have the same prospects in the MLS. And for me, I think the biggest eye opener was Redondo, who I thought would be a really good player in the MLS. I thought would really shine, at least if not in his first season, then the second season. But he's struggled with the physicality of the MLS. He's struggled with the athleticism of the MLS. So we need to consider those other aspects when we're looking at some of these players as well.
No, and listen, I don't think that just because these players came from the LPF, they're not good players.
Yeah.
I just think they've all failed to the expectation or the price tag. Federico Redondo, to this day, is the second most expensive defensive midfielder in the history of the league. And he's not even one of the two best defensive midfielders on the team. That's, I think, a disappointment in any way you look at it. Now, that doesn't mean Redondo is terrible. It doesn't mean he can't play at this level. But it does mean he didn't live up to the price tag. Toto Aviles, you could say, has been a good player, one of the most expensive center backs in the history of the league, $7.5 million. That is not something very many people, very many teams are spending on a center back. And he's not even in the team. He's not even a locked-in starter for the second coach. So, and that's not a shot at Davies and his talent and his potential, but it is to say that he was worth way more than the actual product you were getting. The same goes for Federico Redondo, Gonzalo Lujan. You guys know my sort of feeling on him. Chelo Wiegand, similar. And David Martinez was supposed to come in and revolutionize our center back position, and he hasn't. Even though he's been fine, he hasn't been revolutionary. Maybe it's unfair to say anything about Facundo Farias because we didn't get enough of a sample size, and certainly the same with Baltasar Rodriguez, but the track record is not great. And then when you look at some of the other buys that we've been able to make happen, and the reason I started when Messi signed was because the day Messi signed, our pull changed dramatically. And I think you're talking about just a higher quality of player, and they didn't all work out, but overarching, there's significantly more success from anywhere but the LPF. And I see people in the chat saying that it's cheaper buys. That is so wrong. They charge as much as anyone from South America for their players, and the success rate has not been particularly good. I have done a little bit of digging league-wide, and I still don't find it particularly successful, but certainly at Inter Miami, it is not a place that Inter Miami's found a ton of success or sort of value. And so it makes me nervous that the guys they're attached to are from the Argentine league because, again, I think if you look at the players, you can see that the success rate in terms of the value they've brought for the price tag and the expectations has not been there. And so I think Inter Miami fans should be wary about that. I do.
And maybe this is just one example. I'm sure there's going to be other leagues as well that we'd be able to try and do a little bit of analysis on. And it'd be a really interesting conversation to understand which leagues we've recruited from have been successful versus which have not, for instance, the Argentine league. But yeah, it's also about what play style Inter Miami wants to play and whether players from the Argentinian league fit that play style and fit that profile. At the end of the day, it's all about being able to fit the profile that Inter Miami wants. And it just seems like every player we've got from the Argentine league has not necessarily lived up to the expectations of what they were touted to be.
Yeah, and if you go back beyond, when Messi arrived and you look at the Matthias Pellegrinis and the Julian Carranzas, they were also way more expensive than the sort of final product. So it's not just a since Messi arrived thing. I just was making a graphic quickly and I didn't want to go back that far, but that holds true. There's a couple of exceptions, Nico Figal, for example, but for the most part, it's not been particularly successful. And then again, you look at the rest of the pool of players that we brought in, and there's a lot of success, a lot of talent, and a lot of guys that went
value
through
for
Argentina.
Money. Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that went through Argentina, but then were so good they got moves out. And those are the players that sort of I feel a little bit better about. Tadeo Allende was so good in Argentina, he got a move to La Liga. Matias Rojas was so good in Argentina that he got a move to Corinthians. And even if they didn't do tremendous things there, they've already proven they were way too good for the LPF. And so it makes me nervous that that's where a lot of the names are coming from.
Yep, absolutely.
You want to wrap up this episode?
I think so.
Okay.
No, I think so, because we've talked about the Club World Cup. We've talked about what we're doing in the lead up to the Club World Cup with the players that we're signing. And the next one's going to be fun because we're going to talk about why Inter Miami should win the games in the Club World Cup. And that's going to be chaotic. That's going to be slightly crazy. And we might be shouting at each other. So look forward to that episode because it's going to build up into what's going to be a fantastic 3 games for Inter Miami on the global stage against some of the best teams in the world.
I think the excitement should start right now.
Absolutely. I'm ready. I'm ready to switch on my TV and talk about Inter Miami. And we've talked about doing something special for the Club World Cup. We still don't know what that special looks like. We'll see. Maybe we'll just do like a 2-hour long pregame show or something. But it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know why some of the other fans are not as excited for it, and you're completely justified in your opinion, I'm sure. But I am personally very excited to see Inter Miami go up against some of these great teams in the world.
6-hour pregame show.
Let's do it, man. I don't have anything else to do in my life, anyways. Might as well.
It's a Saturday, man. It's perfect. We could just talk about
Yeah.
Imam Ashur for an hour, who is the wonderful midfielder for Al Ahly. That's their best player, and also couldn't make it in Denmark. So I think Inter Miami
Now
can do
repeat that
something.
for 6 hours, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
I know.
you'll get there.
Here's why he was good enough to get out of Egypt, but here's why he wasn't good enough to stay out of Egypt. Boom. That's a whole hour right there. Okay, let's wrap it up. I will remind you guys, this episode was about some of the intangibles that Inter Miami should just look forward to, and something the fans should look forward to that isn't just the results of the game, that they should get excited, because this is a really cool tournament. Our next episode will be about if Inter Miami can actually compete. We will spend some time looking at these three clubs we're going to face in the group stage, and we'll have a little bit more nuanced conversation about what Inter Miami can do. But until then, guys, enjoy your night, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Until next time. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this, and have a wonderful day.